Hey everybody, welcome back to Volume 8 of 5 disturbing, creepy, paranormal, and just spine-chilling posts that I find and narrate on Reddit. I really hope that you enjoy this video. Please don't forget to give it a like if you do enjoy it, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more. Here are the stories. My Hills Have Eyes moment in Texas. In 2010, I was driving from New Orleans to Eugene. It was just me, a 24-year-old female, and my 2-year-old pit bull in a 14-foot U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back, a fancy flip phone, and my printout of MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I'm starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I see a small town coming up. I pull into this town, and it is tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town. But there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I go gas up, and I'm ready to get back on the road. Except, I cannot for the life of me find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times and start getting so frustrated because this is such a tiny town. How can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway, but can't get to it. I return to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at a magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He's telling me to take a road that will get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment, I'm dumbfounded. Then I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town. Why so far to get back to the highway? I can literally see it from the town. He's so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why should he care? He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that doesn't really make sense. He still doesn't look at me. Just whatever. I gave you your directions and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I get into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into the ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet, this was the only store in this little town, and short of knocking on doors, no thank you, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a damn if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my own way out, even if it took all damn night. Then a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and disgorged a quintessential Texan man, huge, husky, and in flannel work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly yet warily. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turn-off right at the end of the small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers, because it was so hard to see, and that they need to put up signs. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles was it back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here. At this point, I couldn't help it. I had to know. What happens if I drive? And I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. Texas looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was pretty far out and usually only locals know about it. So I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes and then asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. Nope, just my MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box, spreading it out for me. He traces the route I describe. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from the town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. Texas told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junked cars and a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in Texas's eyes as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be careful traveling out there. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texan stranger. You really saved my ass, and I'll always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask your name. You're forever Texas to me now. I could have been one of Epstein's victims. I was watching the Jeffrey Epstein doc on Netflix last night and I'm spooked. I literally had a mini panic attack with all these memories flooding in. As I'm laying in bed watching, a girl's face flashes across the screen and I recognized one of his victims as one of my really good childhood friends. I don't know if it belongs in the subreddit, but here's my story. I've lived in South Florida almost all my life with my crazy controlling parents that wouldn't let me do anything as a kid. No phone calls to friends, no extracurricular activities unless it was academic. I couldn't have friends over, and you can forget about me going over to anyone's house. Plus, my dad worked at my school during my elementary school years, so I had to be on my best behavior. So when I went to middle school, I was so pumped. Finally, some type of freedom. My personality started to shine, and making friends came easy to me. Fast forward to a year in, and I had become really good friends with these two girls. We can call them Heather and Sharon. They were both pretty, popular, friendly, but what fascinated me most was that Heather was the only girl in middle school that I knew that was able to sleep over at a boy's house. It was something so foreign to me, since my parents told me I couldn't even go on a date with a boy until after I graduated. I'm not sure whether they meant high school or college, they didn't specify. So I automatically thought she was the coolest chick I've ever met. Throughout our friendship, we were known as the tripod. We had all the same classes and lunch periods, so we all got pretty close. Over time, Heather would always ask me to hang out with her and Sharon, either after school or on the weekends, but with my parents, there was no way in hell. I did attempt multiple times to ask for permission with no success each time, not even a maybe. I was so bummed because I always felt left out having Heather and Sharon hang out without me, something I would eventually become grateful for. One day, while sitting out in the courtyard for lunch, Heather pulled me aside and asked what I thought about skipping school for one day. I instantly freaked out and thought about that automated message the school calls home with to let your parents know you weren't at school. If my parents ever got that, my ass would be toast. So I shut that idea down right away, kinda laughed it off because there would be no way to pull it off. But she literally would not stop asking. So eventually she convinced me and we were ready to start the planning. It took us about a week every day during lunch trying to figure out how to pull this off. The thrill of it had me so excited, as I've never done anything like this. The plan was to have my mom drop me off at school as usual and have the girls there waiting for me, and we would simply just walk off to the gas station that's near the school and have one of Heather's friends pick us up. I'm not sure how I planned on dodging the school call, but whatever. Oh, and I forgot to add, Heather made it a point several times to remind me that I need to wear something that would give me an innocent look. I blew this off because I was already 13 years old. I looked innocent enough. The plan goes smoothly and we are walking to the gas station. But as we're walking, Heather's cell phone is blowing up, like constant phone calls and texts coming through. Each one she answers, "Just meet us at the gas station like we usually do." At this point, I'm confused because I thought it was supposed to be the tripod hanging out for the day. As we get closer to the gas station, I see a group of like 7 other girls standing there, and they're around my same age range, around 12 to 14 years old. Some girls I've seen around school, others I don't recognize, but they all perk up when they see Heather walk up. All of a sudden, Heather yells, "Who's ready to make some money?" And almost all the girls raise their hand and start cheering. I grabbed Sharon and asked her what she's talking about, and the look that Sharon gave me is one I'll never forget. It was like she was saying, "Get out now while you can." It just made me very uncomfortable, and she never ended up saying anything. It was just weird. A big group of young girls who should be in school just hanging at a gas station. As we're standing there, 2 black Lincoln Town cars pull up and make a sudden stop right in front of us. Heather starts numbering the girls and tells the first group to get in the first car, and as they do, the car speeds away. The other one slowly rolls the window down, and I see this older man with sunglasses on just sitting there smiling. He asks if we're ready to go to the mansion, which excites the other 2 girls standing behind me. He opens the door and they both jump in, followed by Sharon. Heather is standing next to me and nudges me to go on, but as she does, I start going off on her, asking her what the hell is going on, where are we going, who is this man, and why didn't she mention this in any of her plans? She's looking almost annoyed at me and says, "Out of all the girls I bring, you're the only one that's giving me a problem. I thought you would want to get out and finally have some fun, and with your body, you could make a killing." At the time, I was so naive. I didn't know exactly what she meant, but by the tone of her voice and how pressured she was making me feel, I ended up backing out and ran back to school. As embarrassed as I felt for bailing on my friends, I feared my mom and her belt a lot more. Plus, going off in a car with someone I've never met screamed stranger danger. I'm so grateful that my parents put that fear in me, or else I don't know if I would have made that smart decision. After that, I barely hung out with Heather again. She tried a few more times, but I just got bad vibes from her and cut her off. But I always saw her randomly walk out of school towards the gas station, always with a group of girls. Sharon, on the other hand, she started to spiral into depression slowly. She would only hang out with Heather and would cling to her like a lost puppy. I noticed she would miss school more frequently, until one day she just stopped coming altogether. Years later, I found out she ended herself, and recently, after watching the documentary, I'm convinced she was one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, and Heather was one of his recruiters. Make sure to always lock your doors. 23-year-old guy here. I live in a pretty safe neighborhood and usually always lock my doors. Last night, I apparently didn't. It was not too long after I had taken my dogs out for the last time and was turning off the TV and lights when one of my dogs started growling. Not too weird, since he sometimes does that when people walk by the house. He only does it to certain people, not everyone. I then heard the front door open and someone walk in. My dog then started barking. My other dog, who loves all people, came running from the other room to greet our guest. At the same time, I was reacting to what was happening and went, "What the hell? Who are you?" Standing in the hall was a guy in his mid to late 20s. He was skinny and tall. Oh wait, I don't think I'm in the right place. He genuinely seemed confused. I replied with, "Hell no you aren't, please get out." He apologized and said he was coming to hang out with a friend and just accidentally went to the wrong place. I asked him what house he was looking for, and he said a number that was just a few couple numbers off from mine. He apologized again and left. He seemed nice and non-threatening, but I was still kind of spooked. This morning I was ready to laugh the whole thing off. I was planning on telling my neighbor, a couple in their 30s, what happened. I don't know them all too well, but we have talked before. Luckily, I caught one of them when I was taking my dogs out. I didn't want to come off like I was mad or scared over what happened, so I casually said, "I'm sure he told you about it, but your friend paid me a surprise visit last night." My neighbor gave me this confused look and said, "What are you talking about?" "Your friend. He walked into my house last night thinking it was your place." My neighbor was quiet for a second and then said, "I don't want to alarm you, but I have no idea what you're talking about. We didn't have a friend over last night." Got lost in the woods for 8+ hours as a little girl and saw something unexplainable. I grew up in a densely forested, rural area in central Virginia, and like most kids my age, I was 10 at the time of the story. I spent a lot of time playing in and around the woods. My best friend and I had found a creek one day while exploring different deer trails through the woods. This creek we happened on was a very rare find and the perfect spot for us to play. It was wide and deep enough to swim around in and had a nice soft mossy bank on either side to rest on after we had tired ourselves out. The water was cool and clear, no copperheads and no mosquitoes because the water was constantly running. We were psyched. After a few hours of swimming, we had to walk back home for lunch, but made plans to pack lunch the next day so we could have a picnic on the creek banks and spend the whole day there. The next morning we set out for the woods at around 1 p.m, planning to have the picnic first and swim after. We entered at the same spot we had the previous day and followed what we thought was the same deer trail. It was not. At the point where we should have found the creek, we walked into a small clearing that was covered in huge, thick ferns. We had definitely never walked past this before. So, both being hungry and tired of walking, we decided to eat in the clearing. We laughed and played around there for a while, spitting watermelon seeds at each other from our lunch. It was an absolute blast and we were both in wonderful giddy moods. That all changed, however, as soon as we packed up and set back out to find the creek. As we walked on, the woods started to feel darker and colder. We got skittish and I noticed my friend kept whipping her head around to look behind us. After about a half hour of walking, we came up on what looked like an entire overgrown bathroom. Sink, toilet and bathtub, all sitting arranged together and covered in ivy. It's pretty common to find weird stuff like this in the middle of the woods, so we just walked on and made jokes to lighten the mood, calling it Bigfoot's bathroom. After another hour of walking and not seeing anything we recognized, we started to panic. Instead of trying to reach the creek, we were now just trying to find our way back home or out of the woods, at least. I told her we should follow the sun and eventually we would come up on a road or someone's property where we could find help. She insisted on another way and we began yelling at each other out of fear and, let's be honest, little girl bossiness. I told her if she thought she was so right, she should just go her way and we would see who got out first, so we split up. Now, as an adult, I fully acknowledge that I was being a stubborn brat and also an idiot. Worst possible thing we could have done. Not 10 minutes after splitting up, I began to hear someone walking maybe 100 feet behind me. Thinking it was my friend deciding to go my way after all, I slowed down so she can catch up to me. Instead, whatever it was matched my pace. I slow down, it slows down. I stop, it stops. This went on for hours. The whole time I was going back and forth on whether or not it was in my head or there was really something following me. I picked up a big stick, swung it a few times to make sure it was sturdy if I had to hit someone, and trucked on. As it began to get dark, I came up on something that made my heart sink to my stomach. It was Bigfoot's bathroom. I had just walked in a huge circle for hours, despite being 100% sure I was following the setting sun west the entire time. Confused and frustrated, I sat down on a log and just screamed my little heart out while smacking my whoop-ass stick repeatedly into the ground. As I tried to collect myself, I heard the footsteps again walking up on me from behind. I called out my friend's name as loud as I could, no answer. Then after a short pause, the steps began to run towards me. I jumped up and booked it as fast as I could in the opposite direction. Now this is a truly horrifying part which I typically omit while telling people the story. As I was sprinting through the darkening woods, I began to hear what I thought were church bells. I looked up to see the darkest, deepest cloud I've ever seen in my life. In the middle it was so black, it was like looking into the night sky, and the dark grey around it seemed to be swirling. It gave me a horrible feeling to look at, almost like the nausea you get when looking through binoculars too long. What sickened me further is that I realized the sound of the bells was coming through the hole in the cloud. They were deafeningly loud, I mean really booming out of this thing. When I realized this, I stopped dead in my tracks. I felt a sense of absolute and overwhelming dread that has gone unmatched in all my 24 years on this planet. Something in my head began screaming that if I did not run away from whatever the hell that cloud was, no one would ever see me again. I would be gone. I did not want to run towards the thing chasing behind me either though, so I made a sharp right and took off away from both. It was now completely dark, and I was running blind through the woods, smacking through branches, wheezing, and tripping every few feet for what seemed like another hour, until I smacked into something low and flew over it, hitting the ground so hard all the air in my lungs was knocked out of me. As I lay there trying to recover, I realized I couldn't hear the bells anymore. Then my eyes adjusted more to the dark, and I realized what had just made me go ass over teeth was an old fence. Grabbing hold of it, I prayed it would lead me to a farm, and sure enough it did. I walked up over a hill about a mile to the back of the farmhouse, explained what had happened, and the farmer graciously gave me a ride back home. I was covered head to toe in scrapes, oozing blood, and more exhausted than I had ever been in my life, but I was finally safe. It was past 9 p.m. when I finally walked through my front door. My friend had gotten back shortly after we split, and figured I had as well, so hadn't told anybody I was lost, and my family just figured I was still out after dark, which wasn't uncommon for me. They were shocked when I walked in beat up and crying. Nobody had been looking for me at all. To this day, I wonder how long they would have waited to come find me if I hadn't been lucky enough to find the fence, and if it would have been too late. To the eerie guy that tried to follow me to my apartment. I got off of work around 11 p.m. The sad part about this is, I volunteered to work this shift. If I had never offered, I would have never experienced this. This particular apartment is on my college campus. My campus is an open campus, which means anyone could enter at any time. As a female, I guess that's pretty unnerving. However, I always carried a pocket knife and pepper spray. I had to park pretty far away from my apartment since most parking spots were filled. I finally found a parking spot, but thank God I checked my surroundings before I got out. There was a fairly tall, grimy old black man standing about 50 feet away from me. This sent chills down my spine because he stood so still, like a mannequin. I could see his bloodshot eyes. They were wide open. Now I knew I wasn't getting out of the car, but what the man yelled to me made my heart pound out of my chest. "Come here, pretty girl," he said, with a slight creepy grin on his face. I don't know why I did it, but I shot a bird at him. Probably because I had a feeling he was a pervert or something. I put my car in reverse and backed out of the parking spot, keeping my eyes on the man. My heart pounded even harder when he started speed walking towards me. He was about 10 feet away from my car when I finally put my car in drive and stomped on the gas pedal. I literally drove to the other side of the apartments and panicked. I called my roommate/best friend and told her what had just happened. I asked her to wait for me at the door and stay on the phone with me. I stayed in my car for about 5 minutes to calm myself down. I kept looking around to see if the guy had followed me. He was nowhere to be seen. I didn't want to get out of my car, however I had to get in my apartment somehow. I parked in a spot where my apartment wasn't too far away anymore. I decided to book it towards my room. I had my best friend on FaceTime the entire time I sprinted. I flew down 2 flights of stairs until finally I was about 100 feet away from my door. I saw my best friend waving at me. A feeling of relief came over me, just for a few seconds. Now I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Get Out, but just picture a grown-ass man sprinting towards you. That's what happened. The grimy old man hauled ass towards me, but this time he looked pissed. It was like a scene straight out of a horror movie. I don't know how he found me. I don't know what his problem was, but I could have broke the national record for the 40-meter dash. I darted towards my door. Thankfully, I reached my apartment just in time. Right when my best friend and I slammed the door, the man's fingers got caught in the crack. He screamed and tried to shove the door open, but my best friend and I surprisingly shut him out. That happened about a year ago. My best friend and I never spoke about it, ever. I never saw the man again. I never volunteered to work another night shift. I never worked another night shift, period. And I never, ever shot a bird at anyone else. To the man who traumatized me, let's not ever meet again. And those were the stories. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe if you did enjoy this video. If you have any disturbing, creepy, or paranormal stories of your own that you'd like to share with me, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments, or email me, or you can leave it on the Reddit community page linked in the description box down below. I would love to read them. If you want me to narrate them on my channel, don't forget to give consent. I hope that you have an amazing week, and I love you all.